We've been hearing more and more about the fighting intensifying in the east. What is the latest on the ground there?
Well, we've been focusing on Severodonetsk, and actually, in truth, the borders, the boundaries haven't changed a great deal. There's incredibly intense fighting. On one side, you've got the Russians overmatching the Ukrainians with 10 times as much artillery as the Ukrainians have. But the dogged resistance of the Ukrainians is largely getting this to grinding to a standstill. Although there are some horrendous casualties emerging, it's really becoming a bit of a meat grinder. The other thing we're seeing up to the north there is Kharkiv. If you remember, some time ago, the Russians were also pushing on Kharkiv, and the Ukrainians have very successfully pushed them back again. And we've seen a few more explosions in Kharkiv, and there was a conjecture that maybe that was the Russians re-attacking. What looks far more likely is the Russians are relatively short. They've been brutally mauled on the battlefield. They're trying to move folks down to reinforce their position at Severodonetsk. And that would risk leaving their flanks exposed if Ukraine pushed even further. So it looks more likely that the artillery fire is just to keep the Ukrainian heads down whilst they reinforce Severodonetsk. But the fighting's pretty severe, as you'd expect. And actually, emotionally, for both sides, the intensity is taking its toll on both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side. But, of course, the Ukrainians are fighting for their homeland. They're massively well motivated. Whereas, of course, the Russians, a bunch of conscripts who are still probably asking us tens of thousands of casualties mounting up. Why are we here?
And also NATO consistently saying that they want to de-intensify the situation and avoid a wider conflict with Russia. But today we heard from the new head of the British Army that they've told its troops that they must prepare to fight in Europe once again. So what's changed?
Well, I think we have to set the context here. I think the war has gradually slipped down the media agenda somewhat. You have to search further and further down to find it. There are also some leaders in the international stage, I won't quote them, but who clearly would like this war to be concluded quickly. Get President Zelensky to conclude a deal around the Donbass and the Crimea, and then all of a sudden fuel prices can return to their normal level. Grain can report to its normal level, inflation can be controlled and get on with domestic issues. The problem with that is it's not a European war, it's Putin's war, and it's only the person who understands what his ambitions are is Putin himself. And I think more worryingly of late, Putin he started with a special operation, then it became an invasion. He's now starts to refer to Peter the Great, an analysis of himself being like that. Well, Peter the Great was one of the architects of the former Soviet Union. He's also talked about the former Soviet states, some of the states up in the Baltics here, and also down through on the boundary of Russia, talking to them being part of historic Russia, with a clear threat that they're next. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Prime Minister and the Secretary-General are talking about this potentially being a much longer war. I was talking to the defence attaché to Russia literally only a week ago, and he was saying one of the things we really underestimated in the West, when the Soviet Union fell, Russia was left with massively battered pride. The pensions weren't being paid, salaries weren't being paid. They felt devastated as a proud nation. Putin has come in as a new leader. He controls all the media and seems to want to restore Russian greatness, and that resonates well with his domestic audience. So it could be that this war will be concluded with the Donbass down to the Crimea and a swathe of land. But as appears increasingly likely, this is the first chapter in a long series of chapters about Russians' intent to re-establish the Russian Empire. And the worrying thing for that is, up to the north here, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania now fall under the protective umbrella of NATO. And therefore, any threat to those nations would be a threat to NATO. NATO has to be prepared. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing an increase in NATO activity and some more stoic narrative from some of the military leaders.